My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I'm 35 years old. To the business world in Austin, I'm the CEO who turned a $1,000 investment into a seven-figure marketing empire. To my family, I'm still the responsible older sister who always fixes everyone else's problems. What they didn't know is that I'd been collecting evidence of their betrayals for months, building a case that would destroy not just my cheating husband and backstabbing sister, but the entire web of lies they'd spun around my life. Today, at what was supposed to be our 10th wedding anniversary celebration, they were about to discover that the woman they'd underestimated had been 3 steps ahead of them all along. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Texas sun was already blazing at 9 in the morning as I drove through the winding roads toward Lake Travis, my hands steady on the wheel of my silver BMW. David had insisted we spend our anniversary weekend at the family lake house, the same place where we'd gotten engaged 8 years ago. He'd been unusually attentive lately, bringing me coffee in bed, suggesting romantic getaways, even buying me expensive jewelry that felt more like guilt than love. I should have trusted my instincts then, should have recognized the performance for what it was. The lake house had been in my family for 3 generations, a sprawling cedar and stone structure that overlooked the crystal-clear waters where I learned to swim as a child. My great-grandfather had built it with his own hands back in the 1940s, and it had become the gathering place for every major family celebration since then. Christmas mornings, birthday parties, graduations, and yes, anniversaries. It was supposed to be our sanctuary, our place of joy and memory-making. Instead, it became the crime scene where I discovered that my entire marriage was a fraud. I pulled into the gravel driveway and noticed Jessica's white Range Rover already parked in the shade. Strange, I thought, since she wasn't supposed to arrive until later that afternoon. David had specifically mentioned that we'd have the morning to ourselves before the family started showing up for our anniversary dinner. My sister had volunteered to help with the decorating and food preparation, playing the role of the devoted sister and sister-in-law that she'd perfected over the years. As I walked up the familiar wooden steps to the wraparound porch, I could hear voices coming from inside. Laughter. Low, intimate conversation that made something cold settle in my stomach. I'd learned to trust that feeling over the years, the same instinct that had helped me navigate hostile business negotiations and spot lies in marketing pitches. Something was wrong, and my body knew it before my mind could catch up. I slipped my key into the lock as quietly as possible, the old brass mechanism turning with the same soft click it had made since I was a teenager, sneaking back in after late nights with friends. The front door opened into the spacious living room with its vaulted ceilings and massive stone fireplace. The same room where David had proposed to me on Christmas Eve all those years ago. The same room where family photos lined the mantelpiece, including our wedding picture where Jessica stood beside me as my maid of honor, her smile bright and seemingly genuine. The voices were coming from the master bedroom upstairs, and as I moved across the hardwood floor in my soft-soled shoes, the conversation became clearer. It was David's voice, but softer and more tender than I'd heard it in months. There was another voice responding, female, breathless with laughter. My heart began to pound as I recognized the second voice, though my mind refused to process what that recognition meant. I climbed the stairs 1 step at a time, my hand gripping the polished oak banister that had steadied 3 generations of my family. Each step felt like moving through water, slow and heavy with the weight of impending discovery. At the top of the stairs, the master bedroom door was slightly ajar, and through the gap, I could see movement on the bed that my great-grandmother brought from Ireland, the same bed where I'd spent countless summer nights as a child listening to my grandmother's stories about the old country. What I saw through that door crack destroyed 8 years of marriage and 35 years of sisterhood in a single devastating moment. David was there, his dark hair tousled, his wedding ring glinting in the morning sunlight that streamed through the lace curtains my grandmother had made by hand. And beneath him, her blonde hair spread across the antique quilted bedspread, was Jessica, my sister Jessica, who'd stood beside me at my wedding and promised to love and support our marriage. Jessica, who'd been coming to our house for Sunday dinners every week for nearly a decade. Jessica, who'd held my hand when I miscarried 2 years ago and promised me that everything would work out the way it was supposed to. They were so absorbed in each other that they didn't notice me standing in the doorway, frozen in a moment that would replay in my mind for months to come. David was whispering something that made Jessica laugh, that musical laugh that had charmed everyone since we were children. She reached up and traced his jawline with her finger, the same gesture I'd seen her use on every boyfriend she'd ever had, the same practiced seduction that had worked on half the men in Austin. The betrayal was like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs and sending shockwaves through every nerve in my body. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a recent mistake. The intimacy between them spoke of familiarity, of a relationship that had been building for months, maybe longer. The way Jessica's hand moved across David's chest, the way he looked at her with an expression I hadn't seen him wear for me in years, told a story of deception that went deeper than a simple affair. I backed away from the door, my legs somehow carrying me down the stairs and out of the house without conscious thought. I made it to my car before the tears came, hot and angry, and filled with a rage that surprised me with its intensity. I'd built my business by staying calm under pressure, by thinking strategically, even when emotions ran high. But sitting in that driveway, staring at the house that represented everything I thought was solid in my life, I felt something break open inside me that had been building pressure for years. My phone buzzed with a text message, and David's name appeared on the screen. The casual cruelty of it made my hands shake as I read his words. "Hey babe, running late with some work stuff. Why don't you head to the lake house and I'll meet you there around noon. Love you." The lie was so smooth, so effortless, that I wondered how many others there had been. How many times had he looked me in the eye and fed me fabrications while planning his next rendezvous with my own sister? I drove back towards Austin in a haze of fury and disbelief, my mind racing through months of suspicious behavior that I'd rationalized away. The late nights at the office that couldn't be verified, the sudden interest in weekend trips that always seemed to coincide with Jessica's own mysterious absences, the way they'd started texting each other directly instead of going through me for family communications, the inside jokes that I wasn't part of, the shared glances that I dismissed as sister-in-law bonding.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Marcus Chen had been trying to reach me all morning about a client presentation, but I'd ignored his calls in favor of my romantic anniversary plans. Now, sitting in the parking lot of a roadside diner 20 minutes outside the city, I finally called him back. Marcus had been my business partner and closest friend since college, the one person who'd believed in my vision when I was still running my marketing consultancy out of a cramped apartment near campus. His voice was immediately concerned when he heard the strain in mine. "Sarah, what's wrong? You sound like you've seen a ghost." I almost laughed at the accuracy of that description. I had seen a ghost, the ghost of my marriage, the phantom of trust that had been haunting my relationship for months without my knowledge. "Marcus," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." There was a pause, the kind of silence that comes when someone is preparing to deliver news they know will hurt. "Have you noticed anything strange about David lately? Any behavior that seemed off to you?" The sigh that came through the phone told me everything I needed to know before Marcus even spoke. "Sarah, I've been wanting to talk to you about this for months, but I didn't know how to bring it up without proof. There have been rumors around town, people saying they've seen David at restaurants and events with someone who looked like Jessica. I've been doing some discreet checking, trying to figure out if there was an innocent explanation." The confirmation hit me like a second wave of betrayal. Not only had my husband and sister been conducting their affair right under my nose, but other people had known about it. The humiliation was almost worse than the infidelity itself. I'd been walking around Austin for months, building my business and maintaining my reputation, while whispers followed in my wake about my cheating husband and his relationship with my own sister. "How long have people been talking?" I asked, dreading the answer. "At least 4 months that I know of," Marcus replied gently. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I should have said something sooner, but I kept hoping I was wrong, that there was some other explanation." 4 months. 4 months of public humiliation while I'd remained blissfully unaware, playing the role of the devoted wife and supportive sister. 4 months of dinner parties where people probably pitied me, business meetings where my personal life was likely whispered about in bathroom conversations, family gatherings where David and Jessica had probably shared secret smiles over my head. I ended the call with Marcus and sat in that parking lot for nearly an hour, watching 18-wheelers pull in and out while I processed the complete destruction of my life as I'd known it. The marriage I'd thought was solid, despite its recent rough patches, was a lie. The sister I'd trusted with my deepest secrets and most vulnerable moments was a stranger. The family I'd supported and protected for years had been harboring a deception that made a mockery of everything I believed in. But as I sat there, something shifted inside me. The initial shock and hurt began to crystallize into something harder and more focused. I'd built a multi-million-dollar business from nothing by outthinking my competition and staying 2 steps ahead of market trends. I'd navigated hostile takeover attempts and emerged stronger. I'd turned client disasters into opportunities and transformed failing campaigns into success stories. This situation would be no different. David and Jessica had underestimated me, just like everyone else in my life had always done. They saw me as the responsible older sister, the devoted wife who would always put family first, the woman who would sacrifice her own needs to keep everyone else happy. They had no idea that the same strategic mind that had built my business empire was now focused entirely on their destruction. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app, creating a new document titled Project Accountability. If they wanted to play games with my life, I would show them what a real strategist could do. They'd given me the motivation and the moral justification. Now it was time to give them consequences they'd never forget. The drive back to Austin was different from the morning's journey. The woman who'd left the city full of anniversary excitement was gone, replaced by someone harder and more determined. I had work to do, evidence to gather, and a plan to formulate. David and Jessica thought they were smart, conducting their affair in secret while manipulating me into playing the fool. They were about to learn that Sarah Mitchell didn't stay fooled for long. As I pulled into the parking garage of my downtown office building, I made a mental note of the time, 11:47 in the morning, on what should have been one of the happiest days of my year. Instead, it had become the day I stopped being a victim and started being a force of nature. They wanted to betray me? Fine. But they were going to pay a price that would make them wish they'd never met me, let alone crossed me. The elevator ride to the 15th floor felt like ascending to a war room. I had resources they couldn't imagine, connections they didn't know about, and most importantly, I had something they'd lost the moment they decided to betray me. I had nothing left to lose, and that made me the most dangerous person in their world. The real game was just beginning, and I intended to win it decisively. The moment that shattered my world completely didn't come with the discovery at the lake house. It came 3 hours later when I returned to our home in the affluent Westlake Hills neighborhood, the house David and I had bought together during our 3rd year of marriage. I'd spent the afternoon in my office, creating spreadsheets and timelines like I was preparing for a hostile business acquisition, because in a way that's exactly what this had become, a hostile takeover of my own life, orchestrated by the 2 people I'd trusted most in the world. Our house sat on 2 acres of perfectly manicured lawn, a modern farmhouse design with clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows that had been featured in Austin Monthly magazine's Homes of Distinction issue 2 years ago. I'd been so proud of that article, showing it to everyone who would listen, talking about how David and I had finally achieved the American dream. The irony of that memory now felt like acid in my throat as I pulled into our circular driveway, noting that David's black Tesla wasn't there yet. He was probably still at the lake house, probably still in bed with my sister, extending their romantic morning while I dealt with the aftermath of their betrayal. Inside, everything looked exactly as I'd left it that morning. The coffee cups from breakfast still sat in the sink, mine lipstick stained and half empty because I'd been too excited about our anniversary weekend to finish it. David's Wall Street Journal lay folded on the kitchen island, open to an article about market volatility that he'd been reading while I'd chattered about our dinner plans. The normalcy of it all felt surreal, like walking through a movie set after the cameras had stopped rolling. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, each step feeling heavier than the last. The king-size bed was still unmade from the night before, the Egyptian cotton sheets twisted and rumpled in a way that now seemed to mock me with memories of intimacy that apparently meant nothing.
On David's nightstand sat a framed photo from our honeymoon in Santorini, both of us sun-kissed and laughing as we toasted with champagne on a cliff overlooking the Aegean Sea. I picked up the frame and stared at my younger self, at the genuine joy on my face, at the absolute trust in my eyes as I looked at the man I'd promised to spend my life with. That woman in the photo seemed like a stranger now, naive and foolish and completely unprepared for the reality of what marriage could become. I'd been 27 then, still believing that love conquered all, that good people were rewarded for their loyalty and dedication. 12 years later, I understood that the world was a much more complicated and cruel place than I'd ever imagined. My phone buzzed against the dresser where I'd set it down, and David's name flashed across the screen again. This time, instead of a text, he was calling. The audacity of it stunned me. He was probably lying next to my sister, both of them naked and satisfied, and now he had the nerve to call me and pretend to be the devoted husband. I almost didn't answer, but then I realized this could be valuable intelligence. If I was going to destroy them both, I needed to understand exactly how deep their deception ran. "Hey, sweetheart." David's voice was warm and familiar, the same tone he'd used to tell me he loved me just yesterday morning. "I'm so sorry about this morning. The Peterson account hit a snag and I had to handle it personally. Are you still planning to head out to the lake house this afternoon?" The lie flowed so smoothly that I marveled at his skill. There was no Peterson account that I knew of, and David worked in investment management, not client services that would require emergency weekend calls. He'd had hours to craft this story, probably workshopping it with Jessica while they lay in post-coital bliss in my family's bed. "Actually," I said, keeping my voice steady and normal, "I'm not feeling well. I think I might be coming down with something. Maybe we should postpone the anniversary dinner until next weekend." I wanted to see how he'd react, whether he'd push for us to stick to the original plan, or if he'd be relieved to have more time with my sister. "Oh, no, baby. I'm sorry you're not feeling good," he said, and I could hear the relief beneath the false concern. "Maybe that's for the best anyway. We've both been working so hard lately. Why don't you rest up this weekend and we'll do something special next week instead?" Next week, when Jessica would probably be conveniently busy with one of her real estate showings, giving them both alibis for whatever they had planned. The casual way he was willing to postpone our 10th wedding anniversary told me everything I needed to know about his priorities. I was an obligation to be managed, while she was the passion that couldn't be delayed. "That sounds perfect," I lied, matching his false warmth with my own. "I think I'll just stay in bed today and catch up on some rest. Will you be working late tonight too?" "Probably," he said, and I could practically hear him smiling. "This Peterson thing is going to need a lot of attention over the weekend. I might not be home until Sunday evening." A whole weekend. They were planning to spend the entire weekend together, while I stayed home alone, believing I was married to a man who was devoted to our relationship. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. They weren't just having an affair. They were actively orchestrating elaborate scenarios to maximize their time together while minimizing any risk of discovery. After I hung up, I sat on the edge of our bed and let the full weight of my situation settle over me. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a recent mistake. This was a calculated, ongoing deception that had been months in the planning. They had turned my own trust against me,
used my love for both of them as a weapon to blind me to what was happening right under my nose. But as I sat there in the bedroom I'd shared with David for 8 years, surrounded by photos and mementos of our life together, something crystallized in my mind with perfect clarity. They had made one crucial error in their calculations. They had assumed I would remain the same person I'd always been, the peacemaker who avoided confrontation, the family mediator who always tried to see the best in everyone. They had no idea that discovering their betrayal had fundamentally changed me, that the woman sitting on this bed was not the same woman who'd left for the lake house that morning. I walked to the walk-in closet that had been one of my favorite features of the house, with its custom-built shelves and professional lighting system. On the highest shelf, behind winter coats I rarely needed in Austin's mild climate, I kept a small fireproof safe where I stored important documents and my grandmother's jewelry. Inside that safe was something I'd hoped I'd never need to use: a business card for Detective James Murphy, a retired police investigator who now worked as a private investigator, specializing in infidelity cases. I'd gotten his card 2 years earlier from Linda Rodriguez, my business mentor, and the woman who'd helped me navigate my company's early growth phase. Linda had gone through a messy divorce herself and had recommended Detective Murphy as someone who was discreet, thorough, and completely without judgment. At the time, I thought it was an odd thing to give someone, but Linda smiled sadly and said, "Sarah, in business and in life, it's always better to have resources you don't need than to need resources you don't have." Detective Murphy answered on the second ring, his voice gravelly but professional. "Murphy Investigations, Jim speaking." "Detective Murphy, my name's Sarah Mitchell. Linda Rodriguez gave me your card a couple of years ago. I think I need your help with a situation involving my husband and my sister." There was a pause, and then his voice softened slightly. "I'm sorry to hear that, Mrs. Mitchell. Why don't you tell me what's going on, and we can discuss how I might be able to help you?" I found myself telling him everything: the discovery at the lake house, the months of suspicious behavior I'd ignored, the phone call where David had lied so effortlessly about his whereabouts. Detective Murphy listened without interruption, occasionally making small sounds of acknowledgement that let me know he was taking notes. "How long do you think this has been going on?" he asked when I finished. "At least 4 months, maybe longer," I said, thinking about Marcus's revelation and all the signs I'd missed. "Probably since around Christmas, based on when David's behavior started changing." "And what kind of outcome are you looking for here? Some people want evidence for divorce proceedings. Others want leverage for reconciliation. Others just want to know the truth for their own peace of mind." The question stopped me cold because I realized I hadn't thought that far ahead. In the immediate shock of discovery, I was focused on gathering information and understanding the scope of their deception. But what did I actually want to accomplish? Did I want to save my marriage? Did I want revenge? Did I just want them to face consequences for their actions? I heard myself say, "I want justice." And the word felt right as soon as it left my mouth. I want them to understand that actions have consequences, that you can't just destroy someone's life and walk away without paying a price. I want them to hurt the way they've hurt me. "I understand," Detective Murphy said, and his tone suggested he'd heard similar sentiments many times before. "Let me explain what I can do for you. I can provide surveillance and documentation of their activities, which would give you evidence for divorce proceedings if you choose to go that route. I can also dig into their communications and financial records if you give me access to shared accounts. And I can help you understand the full scope of what's been happening, which might include other people or other deceptions you're not aware of yet." The phrase "other people" or "other deceptions" hit me like a physical blow. I'd been so focused on David and Jessica that it hadn't occurred to me there might be additional layers to their betrayal. How many others knew about their affair? How many family gatherings and social events had I attended where people were talking about my situation behind my back?
How many times had I made a fool of myself defending David's character or Jessica's loyalty while everyone around me knew the truth? I want to know everything, I said, my voice stronger now.
Every detail, every communication, every lie they've told. I want a complete picture of what they've done and who else has been involved. Understood. I'll need some information from you to get started, and there will be costs involved. My daily rate is $500 plus expenses, and a comprehensive investigation like this usually takes 2 to 3 weeks, depending on their patterns and how careful they've been. The money wasn't an issue. My marketing agency generated substantial revenue, and I had personal savings that David knew nothing about. I'd learned early in my business career to maintain financial independence, partly because I'd seen too many women trapped in bad situations because they couldn't afford to leave. That decision was about to prove more valuable than I'd ever imagined. Money isn't a problem, I told Detective Murphy. When can you start? I can begin surveillance tomorrow morning if you can give me their basic information and likely whereabouts. But, Mrs. Mitchell, I want to make sure you understand what you're signing up for here. Once I start investigating, there's no going back to not knowing. Whatever I find, you're going to have to deal with. Some of my clients decide they were happier in ignorance. His warning should have given me pause, should have made me reconsider whether I really wanted to open this particular Pandora's box. But I was past the point of willful ignorance. The innocence that had protected me for 35 years was gone, burned away by the image of my husband and sister together in my family's bed. Whatever else Detective Murphy discovered couldn't be worse than that, and I needed to know the full truth before I could decide what to do about it. I understand, I said. I'd rather know everything than live in a lie. After we hung up, I spent the next 2 hours providing Detective Murphy with everything he needed to begin his investigation. David's work schedule, his usual routes and hangouts, Jessica's real estate office information, their phone numbers, and access to our shared financial accounts. I also gave him a detailed timeline of when David's behavior had changed and what specific things I'd noticed but dismissed. The process was both cathartic and devastating. Writing down months of red flags made me realize how willfully blind I'd been, how desperately I'd wanted to believe that my marriage was solid, despite mounting evidence to the contrary. David staying late at the office 3 nights a week starting in January, the sudden interest in working out and updating his wardrobe in February, the new cologne he'd started wearing in March, an expensive brand I'd never heard of that he claimed was a gift from a grateful client. The phone calls he'd started taking in private, claiming they were work-related, but speaking in hushed tones that suggested intimacy rather than business. And then there was Jessica's behavior, which I now realized had been equally suspicious. The way she'd started asking detailed questions about David's work schedule and travel plans, her sudden interest in our marriage, asking probing questions about our relationship that I'd interpreted as sisterly concern, but now understood was intelligence gathering. The expensive new clothes and jewelry she'd been sporting lately, claiming they were rewards for successful real estate deals, but never providing specifics when I asked about her recent sales. The most damning evidence was probably the shared calendar David and I had used throughout our marriage to coordinate schedules. I pulled it up on my laptop and cross-referenced it with my own memories of Jessica's availability during the past 4 months. The patterns were undeniable once I knew what to look for. Every time David had claimed to be working late or traveling for business, Jessica had been mysteriously unavailable for family dinners or sisterly activities. They had been coordinating their schedules to maximize their time together while maintaining plausible deniability. As the sun set outside our bedroom windows, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that should have been romantic but now just looked ominous, I made a decision that would change the course of all our lives. I wasn't going to confront them immediately. I wasn't going to demand explanations or give them the chance to spin more lies. Instead, I was going to do what I did best: gather intelligence, build a strategy, and execute a plan that would give me maximum advantage. They thought they were smart, conducting their affair in secret while keeping me in the dark. But they were about to learn that Sarah Mitchell hadn't built a multi-million-dollar business by being naive or passive. They wanted to play games with my life? Fine. But they were about to discover that I played games to win, and I had resources and connections they couldn't begin to imagine.
I opened my laptop and created a new encrypted folder titled Project Justice. Inside, I began documenting everything I knew, every suspicion I had, every lie I could identify. This wasn't just about catching them in the act anymore. This was about building a case so comprehensive and damaging that they would face consequences far beyond anything they anticipated when they decided to betray me. The woman who'd woken up that morning planning a romantic anniversary celebration was gone forever. In her place was someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous. David and Jessica wanted to destroy my life? Fine. But they were about to discover that Sarah Mitchell played games to win, and I had resources and connections they couldn't begin to imagine. The game had changed, and I intended to win it decisively.